Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. Today we are presented by IJM, the International Justice Mission, helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. And right now, protecting the most vulnerable is their utmost priority during COVID-19. And you can learn more about the great work they're doing by checking out their website, ijm.org, ijm.org. We're also presented today by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. An opportunity for you to release a child from poverty is available right now through Compassion, and COVID-19 has left nearly 70,000 children without a sponsor through Compassion. So here's a chance for you to help fill the stadium and team up with pro athletes. Check out their website, compassion.com/teamup, compassion.com/teamup, and pray about releasing a child from poverty today. Very excited to welcome to our show on Sports Spectrum, Patrick Fraher. He is an NBA official, basically an NBA referee. He became a referee back in 2001 and has officiated more than 1,100 NBA games over his 19 seasons as an NBA official, and actually worked the 2015 NBA All-Star Game in New York. Before joining the NBA, he officiated for 7 years in the CBA, where he worked the finals and the All-Star Game there, and has spent a few years in the WNBA as well. He attended the University of Minnesota, where he was awarded the Evans Scholarship and graduated with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. Quite ironic that this guy, who is an engineer, is now an NBA referee. But this is a lot less about the NBA and refereeing and a lot more about faith in Christ. And Patrick's got an amazing story that took him nearly 43 years to get to. It's a powerful one, and I know you'll enjoy it. Take a listen to Patrick Fraher, NBA referee, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Patrick, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Thanks, Jason.
It's good to talk to you. Good to see you, because we're taping this on Zoom. And that's one of the blessings, I guess, during this whole pandemic, is that everybody knows how to use Zoom now. So we can actually see each other when we record our interviews with Sports Spectrum, which is nice. Is it weird for you? We're taping this during the time when the NBA playoffs should be happening in the spring. And you're sitting around doing an interview with this guy on Sports Spectrum, and you're not getting ready to officiate an NBA playoff game. What's this been like for you, just in this weird sort of state that we're all in, but for you specifically with the job that you hold?
It's been surreal. This time of year is, like you said, typically my favorite part.
Yeah.
Playoffs there's nothing like it. I've been walking around the house in my uniform, blowing my whistle at my dog. So
we're all going a little crazy, right, Patrick?
Right. Yeah. It's surreal.
Take us back to the final game that you were a part of before the suspension of the season. Where was that game? And kind of maybe some of the thoughts when you think back leading up to that final game that you actually officiated before we were all placed on pause.
Yeah, I was actually at ground zero. I had Utah at Oklahoma City. We were 15 seconds away from throwing up the jump ball.
Yeah.
When a doctor or a medical director, I forget exactly his title, came running out on the floor with this look in his eye like he's seen a ghost. And so he called us together and he says, we have to postpone this game. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, we fear that, one of the Utah Jazz has tested positive for Corona. And that's when it hit me like, oh, wow, this has begun. This is it. And so we got in contact with the league at the scores table, and the decision to postpone came from way up top. But
right.
That was the beginning of the whole thing. Yeah.
Did you have to get tested? I presume you did, right?
We did. We got tested that night. About 4 to 5 hours after the game, we finally got tested, and all three of us were negative, and we were allowed to go home.
Not a pleasant test, I've heard from the people I've talked to.
No, not fun.
Let me ask you about the emotions kind of leading up to that game, because coronavirus was there and we kind of had heard about it. We didn't know how much it was going to impact everything that it's already impacted, certainly shutting down the world in a lot of ways, especially in the United States and sports. But leading up to that game, maybe the game you did before that, and kind of discussions with your guys that you're working with, and your thoughts in your minds of, all right, maybe this is going to look different, but we're not going to lose the whole season over this, are we? Where was your brain? Where was your thoughts in that?
Basically, it was a lot of speculation. It was, will they take the fans away? Will it be empty? That'll be weird. What happens when the first player catches it? Then what are they going to do?
Right.
And lo and behold, like a week later, it happened. So we got thrusted into it pretty quickly.
What was the last game you actually did ref before the Utah OKC game? Do you remember?
I had Detroit at New York, and that was interesting because Detroit had just played Utah.
Yes.
Previously, and so even though we didn't have our game, there was concern on our part, or at least my part, that wait a second, I just had Detroit and they just saw Utah. So even though we didn't tip the ball, there was a concern that I may have been exposed.
Patrick Fraher is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So for you in this crazy time, right, we're going to talk about your faith journey, and I certainly want to hear your testimony and kind of where the Lord grabbed a hold of your life. But during this time, this quarantine time, what's the Lord been showing you? What's he been revealing to you during this time where we've all kind of had to press pause on life?
Yeah. Early off, I got the impression that it's felt like he's put everybody in timeout, and he's taken away all our toys, the sports, the stock market, entertainment. And I think he wants us to use this time. I'm not saying he created this virus, but he's definitely using it. And
Sure.
He wants to know, what are we going to turn to? Are we going to turn to Netflix? Or are we going to turn to him? And that's kind of where I've been led, I guess, is to turn to him and to trust him.
Patrick, let me ask you about that faith. It's so important to you. You can just tell in the sense of the way you answered that question that the Lord's got a hold of your life. Where does that start? Where does that begin to take shape? Take us back and kind of walk us through your journey a little bit.
Well, I had your typical grade school Catholic upbringing, complete with nuns, and my family had season tickets at church, 7 rows from the front, and so we went to church all the time. I left grade school knowing a lot about God, but not knowing him personally. And what's funny is I can remember sitting in church listening to various people come back and share their testimonies. And I used to think, how can anybody let their lives get screwed up this much? And lo and behold, what am I doing? I'm giving you my testimony. So went to high school and started pursuing my own interests, which were basically sports and girls, not necessarily in that order. Went to college, and when the playing days were over, I replaced playing sports with officiating. So it was officiating, golf, and girls, not necessarily in that order. And so I actually began to have some success with officiating and got hired in the minor leagues in 94, spent 7 years in the minors, and got hired in the NBA in 2001, which really began the American dream and,
Sure.
and chasing everything. And it's amazing how God has used the very thing that I put ahead of him to call me back to him. And so instead of taking it away from me, he actually blessed me with it, and he gave me everything I wanted. But I was still empty. So I actually started a teaching camp for aspiring referees in the summer, and he used that too. At the end of camp, one year I was given a book by a camper of mine, and it was called Be a Man by Father Larry Richards. And that book changed my life. I wasn't ready for it though. He gave it to me. I graciously accepted it, and then I proceeded to put it in my backpack and forget about it for about 6 months. So I was on a flight one day, bored out of my mind, and I was digging through my backpack, picked it up and read it. And it just punched me right in the face from chapter 1. It was all about challenging men on what they believe and how they're living, and to see if the two matched. And so he started asking all these big questions. Do you believe in God? Yes or no? Is Christ God? Yes or no? Do you believe in an afterlife? So mentally I'm going, yep. And then he's setting the hook, because then it's like, well, if you believe in an afterlife and there's nothing, and God's the only thing that can save you, then is there anything more important than that?
Right.
No, there isn't. And then it hit me like, are you living, in his question was, are you living for eternity, or are you living just for today? And I was living for today. I was living the American dream, but it was just for today. So to make a long story short, in November of 2017, I surrendered, and I gave my life to Christ.
Wow. That's not that long ago. That's, 2.5 years ago as we taped this, and you're about the same age as me, in your mid 40s. So that tells me that, because they say, you're shaped by your youth. It's a hard thing when you've lived a long life to suddenly have a transforming of the mind, as it says in Romans 12. What was that like when you finally surrendered? It had to be hard, because for me, I was 26 and I grew up in a very similar way that you did. I was a little bit younger when I said yes, but that didn't mean everything changed immediately. It was a process that continues to this day. Was that kind of how it's been the last couple of years for you, that this has been a process and a journey that you've been on?
Sure. I mean, I'm 46, and I like to say it only took me 43 years to figure it out.
That's right.
It does go back to that book, and everything for me starts with first having an eternal perspective. And once you have one, it changes everything. Like if I asked you, sitting here today, if I gave you the choice between $5 million in cash, the dream house of your dreams, you design it, or a three-stall garage filled with 3 of your dream cars, or a parachute, which would you pick?
I don't know. Probably $5 million.
Very good. So now let me change your perspective and now push you out of a plane at 10,000 feet. Do you want to change your answer?
I'm taking the parachute every time.
Exactly. And that's what I found faith is. Faith is basically forced skydiving. We've been pushed out of a plane because Adam and Eve were pushed out of the garden. And part of the problem is people don't even know they're falling. Now, if you can convince them that they're falling, then you can bring in the gospel, the good news, right? But first they got to know the bad news. Mm-hmm. So I began relearning my faith, and the good news of the gospel is that we're offered a parachute. And I believe I had the parachute from my education, but it was just a backpack at that moment. I hadn't opened it yet. And that's really, what I call the moment of truth, because, we're, as believers, we know that whoever believes in him, shall be saved and have eternal life. Well, that's the key phrase, is believe in him. And you need to believe in the backpack, not believe about the backpack. And right. Just because you believe the backpack exists, or you believe facts about the backpack, it's not until you pull the ripcord that it saves you. And that's when everything changes. That's when you turn from your own falling to putting all your complete belief and trust in the backpack. And that's God calls that repentance. So when you repent, then everything changes.
It does. I was just reading about repentance in my devotional this morning, actually, as we studied the book of Acts. Let me ask you about November 2017, because the NBA season would have started at that point. So you're probably on a plane going to another game to officiate. So walk me through, and I'm not saying to become a better ref. Hopefully you were still being, you're in the NBA, so you're a great official, obviously. But walk me through the purpose that changes in your brain here and in your heart, even more than your brain, as you go about continuing to do the job that you do with excellence, as it says in Colossians. But now you have this newfound faith inside of you. What changes, I guess, in not just your life, but even the purpose for the role that you have as an official?
Right. So you go from, or I went from refereeing the NBA as who I was to what I did. And it's a major difference. The mission changes. The mission from climbing the officiating mountain changes, and you have a new mission now. You're working for him now, and you've just been given this platform. That's what I love about Sports Spectrum is you're giving a platform for the people who've been given the sports circle opportunity to share the faith and share the gospel, because we all know that we're called to do that. So
that's right.
I've enjoyed listening to the various podcasts. I've heard the one with Semi and Anthony Tolliver and Dave Pash. I can't wait to get back out on the floor and see some of these guys.
Yeah. We'll get back to our conversation with Patrick Fraher, NBA referee, in just a little bit, but want to tell you a little bit more about IJM, the International Justice Mission. And protecting the most vulnerable from violence during COVID-19 is of the utmost priority from IJM, the International Justice Mission. And right now, children and families are staying home, yet too many are unsafe in this lockdown. Online sex trafficking of children and domestic abuse are actually on the rise, and it's really sad to watch. But here's a great chance for you to become a part of something bigger than yourself with IJM. Check out their website, ijm.org, ijm.org. They're actively investigating cases of increased violence and human trafficking during this pandemic, and right now doing everything they can for the vulnerable, for the children who are unsafe right now in lockdown. They sure could use your help, and here's a great chance for you to do that. Join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime by visiting ijm.org, ijm.org. We're also presented today by Compassion International, and COVID-19 has left nearly 70,000 children without a sponsor. See, normally, Compassion gets a lot of their sponsorships through these events and concerts and other large gatherings that aren't happening because of the pandemic. And so 70,000 children potentially could be without a sponsor. That's the capacity of an average NFL stadium. And as the world is in the grips of COVID-19, it has led to more sickness. Parents can't work. Food is scarce. And Compassion is doing the best that they can, but it's really a bad situation, or it could get really bad. And this is where Compassion has come in, teaming up with some of our pro athlete friends to respond to this challenge. With your help, we're hoping to fill the stadium with urgent support for a stadium's worth of children in crisis. Check out the website, compassion.com/teamup, and learn about how you can release a child from poverty and truly save a child's life during this COVID-19 pandemic. Compassion.com/teamup. Sponsor a child today. Now back to our conversation with Patrick Fraher from the NBA, an NBA referee joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. The NBA has chapel services. We've talked to chaplains on this show. We've talked to players. Obviously, you mentioned a couple of them, and they have tried to attend chapel services as best as possible. Is that available for officials as well?
It isn't. In Boston, the chapel service is right next to our locker room, and the walls are very thin. So Reverend Gray does a great job with the Celtics and the other teams. I always kind of have my ear to the wall to listen to what he's telling players before the game.
So how do you stay connected to the Lord in a long season, right? I mean, now you have to pause and you have time to sort of change your rhythms probably, and maybe that was even hard too. But what does the daily rhythms and disciplines look like when an NBA season is going on for Patrick Fraher?
For me, it goes back to what Paul said, pray without ceasing. At first, I had no idea what he meant. But it's just an ongoing conversation with him. It's like having an imaginary friend who isn't imaginary.
Right.
My routine is I start with like a daily scripture, which has the gospel and some of the various readings, and then try to spend some time in the Bible and start and end my day like that. As far as other referees, yes. After I made the choice to surrender in 2017, I had an idea, and it was given to me, I believe. And the idea was to come up with a conference for like a faith conference for referees. And I called it the Ref Conference, Referees Embracing Faith.
Yeah.
And so lo and behold, I'm planning for this conference with a friend of mine, Darren George, and we ran the summer camp together. So I said, hey, guess what? We're going to do a referee faith conference. And what I love about Darren is he didn't ask questions. He didn't shoot it down. He being a pastor's kid, he just said, "Oh, okay. What do you need me to do?" So,
right. Yeah.
About a week later, we get an email from a guy named Dan DeFalco from Washington State, and the email was, I don't know, it's 2 pages long, and it was about him introducing himself. He goes, "I heard about the conference that you guys are going to put on. Me and my wife just launched a ministry for sports officials."
Wow.
So I'm like, wow, if this isn't from God, I don't know what is. So Darren and I actually merge with SOS. That's the name of their ministry, Sports Officials Surrendered.
Yes, I've heard of them.
And so we merge our ref conference with SOS. So we're trying to bring all of the believers in the officiating community together, and it's really kind of cool. We have a prayer call every Monday, and it's grown from like 8 people, and it was over 50 people last week, and it's only going to get bigger. So it's pretty neat.
That is awesome. I love hearing that. And it's interesting because as fans and sports fans, we're watching the games, and obviously the official's job is to try and not become part of the game when they're doing it. They just do their job, and hopefully there's no, not being thrown into the fire there in terms of a bad call or whatever. But to hear that there's awesome things happening within the faith community, that the Lord is working and moving in so many different people's lives, it's so encouraging to me. And I'm so glad to hear about that. Let me pivot a little bit, and let's make this a little bit of a story time for me. This is probably something I'm just more curious about, but hopefully the listeners are too. The first being that your NBA journey, as you mentioned, began in 2001. And so many of us, including myself, I believe, have been watching the Last Dance documentary, the Michael Jordan documentary. I know you're watching it as well. And it's fascinating, as you and I are the same age, 46. And so we grew up in the 80s when Jordan first came in the 90s, watched him into dynasties as in our 20s. You and I both have the same sort of perspective on remembering and watching. And certainly Jordan was just fantastic and in a different, sphere, I guess, of fandom. Even though I'm a Celtics fan, still a huge Michael Jordan fan. So watching this documentary has been amazing for me to kind of relive the glory days of the 80s and 90s, if you will, of the NBA. But then Jordan, what I don't know will be, if it'll be touched on, because as we tape this, the Last Dance hasn't fully aired yet. I don't know if they'll touch on his time in Washington, because it is focused on the Bulls. But he returned, for those who are listening that are younger, in 2001 and played until 2003. It happens to be the year that you started out as an NBA official. So I know that you had some encounters with Jordan, having refereed a bunch of different games. Can we just do a little story time? Do you remember the first time you ever reffed a game with Jordan in it, or a specific game that had Michael Jordan be a part of it?
Yeah, I can totally agree with what you're saying. When he was in his heyday, my best friend in grade school was a transfer from Joliet, Illinois.
Okay.
Jim Buffalo. And he was the biggest Bulls fan and Jordan fan out there. So we would watch a ton of Bulls Bulls games at his house. And then we'd go out and we'd jump off his mini tramp and try to dunk. And okay, I digress. My first game with Jordan was actually the first time I caught myself watching the game from a fan's perspective. And we're not supposed to do that. So
right, yeah.
I remember early in the game, they isolated him on the wing on the opposite side of where I was. And they had some rookie on him. I forget who it was. And he palmed the ball and he brought it back behind him. And he was kind of looking at this rookie in the eye, like, you can't guard me. And I was on the other side of the floor trying to, look over to see what was happening. And I just caught myself saying, well, what are you doing? You got to get back to work here. But he was, even though it was towards the end, what I respected about him was, even though I was just a rookie referee, he was very respectful and he treated me very well. When he had something to say, he would come up and he would take his jersey and he'd put his jersey over his mouth and he'd say, "Okay, Pat," and tell me what it was on his mind. But he didn't have to treat a rookie referee like that, and so that I'll always be thankful.
That's good. I've seen guys do that too, and obviously probably maybe got it from Jordan. And just, you don't want to give away what you're saying, but you also don't want to come across as being just screaming and yelling, which, listen, that happens. Players come at you, coaches come at you. I wonder from a demeanor perspective how you handle that and try to remain calm and not just bite. Like I watch Major League Baseball umpires, and sometimes a guy will come up right in his face and start spitting at him and throwing at him and things, and you just can't help it, and then they go back. How are you able to handle it when a coach or a player is just barking in your ear and you're not sure what's going on and you have to kind of remain calm? Sometimes you got to throw guys out too, or call tech, but you got to kind of remain even keel as best as possible.
Yeah, it's a fine line. You want to treat them with respect and you want to try to diffuse the situation if you can. But sometimes I've been in the heat of the battle before, and sometimes lines are crossed, and you got to take care of business. But it's an art.
I have to imagine probably a lot different for you in 2001 than it is in 2020, right?
Yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. That's what makes it a little bit easier. Going into my 19th season, I guess.
That's great. We all have particular moments that stick out in our lives. I wonder for you, you've been a part of so many NBA games, over 1,100, if my math is doing that properly from what I read. A bunch of playoff games, all-star game. What is the one game that you feel like was the most memorable for you to be a part of? And it's weird because Utah OKC might be up there now as the one that never happened, that might stick in your brain forever because the NBA was pressing pause. But is there another game that sticks out that you were like, okay, I know I'm in something, I'm part of something pretty cool here?
Yeah. You're right about obviously the game that never happened.
Right. Yeah.
But I would say the game that sticks out for me was my first time that I got into the second round of the playoffs, and it happened to be in Memphis. And so I took my dad to the game with me. And what was really cool was my partner in that game was Ken Mauer. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, my dad refereed with Ken Mauer. That's how I met Kenny. When I met Kenny, probably when I was 6 years old, and he wasn't hired yet. So now fast forward, you're working a second round playoff game with the guy who refereed with your dad, and to have your dad there, that's pretty cool.
So I didn't know that your dad was a referee. Is he still reffing? Tell me a little bit about your father.
Well, he's still at it. He's he just worked his first state tournament last year and was selected to go back this year before Corona hit.
Wow. So that's where the itch began to get scratched. I have to imagine, watching your dad for so many years.
Yeah, he did a lot of games with Ken Mauer, and at first I would go to the games and wouldn't even pay attention, but at some point I began watching, and a lot of people think that, well, he must have pushed refereeing onto you. It was the other way around. I went to him and said, "Can I try it?" And he's like, "Are you sure?" Yeah, I want to try it. So that's kind of how it started.
What's the toughest part of being an NBA official in your mind?
What's the toughest call?
Toughest part, just the toughest part of being an NBA official.
Why? I like the question, what's the toughest call we have? Because...
Well, let's do that one too.
Well, because Louis Grillo said, I got to give him credit for it. He said, well, our toughest call is the 4:30 wake-up call. And he's right about that. But the toughest part about being an NBA referee is the time away from home, the time away from your family.
Yeah, that's got to be hard. Tell me about the one thing that you wish 27-year-old Patrick knew right now in terms of your walk with Christ that 46-year-old Patrick knows and has learned over the past few years. And we'll wind down with this.
For me, it's I wish I would have knew about the human ego. I actually studied it, and I was going to use it for teaching for that camp. And not to bore everybody, but if I had to boil it down into one sentence, the ego is all about self. It always puts itself first, and it always chases personal glory. And that's not only the prize, whatever that is, but it's also feeling important. And all of our problems in life, officiating included, come from when we don't make the other person feel important. When we chase the prize, that's when we put other things ahead of God. So a lot of things came together when I studied the ego, because that's exactly what happened. My ego was driving early in my life, and was steering the bus, so to speak, and God was in the back seat. So when you figure that out, then you can kind of take the wheel back and straighten things out.
It's well said. Patrick Fraher has been our guest here today on Sports Spectrum, NBA official. And just appreciate your time, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. And whether it's this year, at some point, we'll hopefully see you back on the court. But we'll be watching and looking for you, specifically number 26 on the NBA court during NBA games. Patrick, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
That was really great stuff there from Patrick Fraher, NBA referee, joining us here today on the show. What a testimony, right? Coming to faith at 43 years old, truly giving his life to Christ. It's interesting. I love the analogy that he made with the backpack and the parachute about knowing of Jesus, knowing of the gospel, but not truly surrendering to it, putting your faith and trust completely in it. And for many of us, we have a backpack on us, but we aren't hitting the button and actually opening up the parachute. And so today, as Patrick Fraher gives his testimony, I want to share that with you as well. You see, all of us are born with a sin nature, and it's nothing that we can do. It's something that took place years and years and years ago, and it's in our nature. It's who we are as humans. And so we are eternally separated from God because of that sin nature. And thankfully, God did something amazing in his great love for us, sent his son Jesus to the cross to die for our sins, for those sins that we have committed, the sin nature that we have. And basically, Jesus took the punishment that we deserve, and he gives us access to God. God gave us a way. It's not complicated. He gave us this one way, the only way, the truth and the life found in Jesus Christ, for us to put our faith and trust in Jesus to have that eternal life. That's what John 3:16 is all about. You see it all over sporting events. For God so loved the world that he sent his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And so today, I pray that you make this your day to say yes to Jesus and to respond and to repent, which means to turn away and start a new life in Christ. I love Patrick's story. I hope you have that story as well. If you have, please tell me. Please email me, jason@sportspectrum.com. I'd love to hear your story and your testimony of faith in Christ. Thank you so much for listening. It really does mean a lot. We also appreciate our partners, Compassion International. Check them out at compassion.com/teamup to help team up with these pro athletes to help save nearly 70,000 children without a sponsorship. Compassion.com/teamup. We also appreciate our friends IJM, helping to fight to end slavery and violence and oppression in our lifetime. COVID-19 is ramping that up 100-fold, and IJM's ramping it up as well. And they continue to do great work, and that's why we love them. That's why we're partners with them. Check them out at ijm.org, ijm.org. Thanks for listening. We love you guys. We hope you all have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum.